Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. I'm nearing the end of Annie Grace's book, This Naked Mind, and I just read the chapter she wrote on relapse. Relapse is an important topic in recovery. It's something that is not necessary to recovery, but it is something that a lot of people in recovery encounter. And so a lot of effort has been put into what do we do to prevent relapse, and then if it does happen, what do we do to make sure that it's a one-time occurrence or it happens as few times as possible so that people can get back to living lives in recovery. It's always interesting to see what different authors say about relapse. And here's what Annie Grace says, just an excerpt from this chapter. She says, "Addiction is a war with the highest stakes imaginable. For me, the most terrifying thing about relapse is how easy it is to believe that by relapsing we have lost the war. Society tells us that if we are unable to stick to our decisions, we are weak. If we break promises, we cannot be trusted. It's easy to believe that making mistakes makes us useless. We figure that if we fall off the wagon, we might as well go all the way because it's too late now. We feel beyond repair, no longer worth fixing. We pile up internal guilt, convinced we deserve the hatred of those we love. So we punish ourselves often by drinking more, even to the point where we are sick. We drink to oblivion, binging to numb ourselves to the horror of our failure, hating ourselves more each time, falling further and feeling lower than ever before. It is a mistake to believe that by losing a battle we have lost the war. The truth is that each battle makes us stronger as long as we remain committed to a better tomorrow. We must fight this battle with compassion and forgiveness. We must allow that lost battle to be a reminder of all the reasons we quit rather than an unforgivable mistake. We must remember, losing a battle does not mean we have lost the war." So I tend to agree with what she says here. I think that, one of the worst things that I've seen in people who have relapsed is this descent into an even worse part of addiction, this downward spiral where they just gain this feeling of hopelessness. And what I think is important for people to recognize is that a relapse can be an opportunity to learn. One of my mentors in recovery often talked about the importance of a relapse autopsy, where if you've relapsed, afterward you go back and you take a look at everything that happened and try to really get a good understanding of what are the things I need to change about my recovery in my life in order to prevent this from happening again. And this is what Annie Grace goes into a little later in this chapter. She says, "Examine why you relapsed. Perhaps as you heal, your reasons for not drinking alcohol seem less important. The pain fades and you wonder, is it really as bad as I imagined? Am I missing out? Can I now, with enough distance, moderate?" So let's hit that first one. That's a big one. And I think that a lot of us who have been in recovery for a decent period of time, I've only been in full recovery for 2 years, and I've felt this before. This little tugging in the back of my mind that says, well, maybe you've learned enough about how to live life that you could have a beer or 2 or 3 and you'll be okay. And I have to remember that's when I follow those drinks, and that's when I notice that my mind is saying you can have a beer or 2 or 3, maybe even 4, maybe a 6-pack, maybe a 12-pack on a Friday night won't be so bad. And see, already my mind is trying to stretch it and stretch those limits and pull me back into that place where drinking 1 beer turns into drinking 18. And I know that's going to happen every time. I know without a doubt that that's where I'm going to be. And so when I do have those feelings of maybe I can moderate now, I just have to follow the drink and say, okay, if you moderate and have one beer, what's going to happen next? And the next thing for me is I'm going to immediately find the second one. And after that one, the third, and it's just going to keep going and going and going until I'm right back or worse off than where I started. The next thing she says is maybe you feel socially isolated and desire connection. You wonder if you would fit in better if you have more friends if you had an occasional drink. If you struggle from loneliness, you must find connections. But alcohol will never heal your loneliness or provide friendship. This is why it's so important to get involved with the recovery community. I have more friends in recovery than I ever did when I was in my addiction. In the last 15 years of my addiction, I can count the friends that I could call and really hang out with on one hand. I didn't have a lot of people in the city where I was living that I cared to hang out with or that cared to hang out with me. And the number got smaller as the years went on. Now in recovery, because I am consistently going out and attending meetings and in connection with people in my recovery group and in my recovery community, I have more friends than I know what to do with. And I can imagine that if I weren't doing that, I would feel very socially isolated and think that alcohol or drugs might be a solution to that, but it's not. Connection is the solution to addiction, not going back to the addiction. The next thing she says is, if you are struggling with depression or anxiety, you may begin to wonder if a drink would take the edge off and provide relief. Remember, drinking is like turning off your check engine light. It may temporarily numb your symptoms, but it can never heal you. There's not much I can add to that. That's 100% the case. If you're feeling these kinds of things, you're not going to help yourself by numbing them so that you get a little bit of comfort. That's not what's going to help. Next thing she says is you may drink to fill a void in your life. Societal conditioning convinces you that alcohol is key to filling the holes inside you. This will never happen. Alcohol can only tear you further apart. So, all in all, relapse is a very difficult situation that a lot of addicts do find themselves in. It's important to prepare and to try to avoid relapse as much as possible. But I can tell you from the first drug that I tried to quit was cigarettes. And I relapsed from quitting cigarettes dozens of times. And there were some times where I just said, forget it, I can't do this, I'm going back, and I'm smoking. And I smoked for months after that. But there were other times where I really tried to look at those little relapses and say, what did I not do this time that I need to do differently next time? And it was those times where I learned from it that I was able to put a little bit more into the next time that I quit. And eventually I got to a point where I had a pretty good idea what I needed to do to quit. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to do that with help from a doctor, with medication, and with a lot of effort and support from friends and family. It takes similar things to quit other drugs. Now, to quit the other drugs in my life, alcohol and marijuana were the big ones. I had to go to treatment for that. And once I tried to quit before treatment and it didn't work. I relapsed when I remember one time in particular where I tried to quit smoking pot. I had already stopped drinking alcohol, but I was still holding on to pot, and I tried to quit smoking, and I lasted about 2 days white knuckling it, and then something happened. I got really pissed off, and I blew something completely out of proportion, and I started smoking again. And I realized pretty quickly, you know what? I can't do this by myself. I don't know how to do this in a way where I can quit and quit for good. And so when I went to treatment, I really paid close attention to everything that was being said, everything that they were trying to teach me, because I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't go more than 2 days without finally caving into the pressure and saying, I'm going to go back to using. So my advice would, for anybody who is trying to quit and quit without relapse, is to lean on other people for help and listen to the advice they give. Relapse does not have to be part of your recovery story. But for me to successfully get to a point where I'm currently living without relapsing, it took a lot of listening to other people, and it took a lot of letting my own pride and ego go and listening to other people and admitting that I didn't have all the answers. So that was an extremely important part of it. And the other important part of it was, finding the motivation to not go back down in that hole again. And I had gone far enough down the hole that I didn't want to be there again. And so there's a lot of different thoughts about relapse. There's a lot of different methods of how do we treat a relapse. One of my favorite books, if you're curious to read more, one of my favorite books about relapse is called Staying Sober by Gorski and Miller. That's a really good one. Teaches a lot of good information about both relapse prevention and what do we do after a relapse if it happens. In the meantime, hope this was helpful. If you are in danger of relapsing, don't pick up. Reach out to someone first. Call anyone and keep calling until someone picks up. It's much more worth it to get on the phone and try to get in touch with people than it is to succumb to that weird addictive desire to just pick up to solve your problems. Because I understand that desire, but I also understand that it goes away. It does, but a lot of times you can't get it to go away by yourself. You gotta rely on others. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Have a good one.